But I got a stereo in there now. I had to solder a bunch of
Yeah,
wires, and it was pinned all wrong, but I got a stereo now.
nice. I have a ceiling fan.
Yeah. See, look at
Yeah.
us. We're just two guys who know what we're doing,
I,
getting
uh,
shit done,
I had
doing the Lord's work.
exactly. You needed to install a new stereo to drown out the bad wheel bearing.
Yeah. Why did you have to install a new fan?
Oh, because my when we moved into the office, it got really warm. So we decided to get a ceiling fan to make
Mhm.
it better.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah. And now and then my computer works, my new computer. It, I had to get a new computer because my fan was bad, which I should have just installed a new ceiling fan in my computer. That would have solved everything.
You should have.
Yeah.
So when you installed that, you said there was an old ceiling fan up there?
There was an old light
How was the light mounted?
with a wire box. Not a wire box, but like a metal electric box.
Yeah, um, what I mean is how was that electrical box mounted?
Um, who knows?
A lot of times they'll just hang those in the drywall and there's no real support there. So, like for ceiling fans, they make retrofit kits that they go in between the studs that you throw up there, and then you twist these rods and it pushes out against the wood in the floor and it grips.
I couldn't see there. There's a bunch of drywall around it, but I installed the bracket and then I pulled on it really hard.
Well, hopefully it's fine. If it was new installation, it might be. So it depends on if it's a new installation box or an old installation box. So
Yeah, who knows?
new installation, I bet you that thing's just hanging up there on the drywall. It might come down at some point.
That's fine.
It's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and with that, welcome to Ethica America, where we talk about how to jimmy rig things like installing your car radio with a hacksaw.
Yeah. I had to buy wire cutters and strip the wires because there's like 5 feet of extra wire inside of the ceiling fan and it just wasn't installing with it. So I took it off and it worked.
Yeah. Ceiling fans are about the worst thing to install too, because like you got all that weight, right? And yeah, you can take some of it off, right? But once it comes to
Hmm.
wiring, you hang it up there, and then you're given like next to no space to get your hands in there to twist wire nuts or install Wagos or however you do it.
Yeah, it wasn't great,
Yeah.
but it was easier than I thought it was going to be. It was also cheaper than I thought it was going to be. So
Yeah.
thank you, inflation, for not going towards ceiling fans.
I've noticed inflation hasn't really hit Amazon very hard. So, but I don't know where you got your ceiling fan.
Lows.
Oh, that's pretty much
Yeah.
Amazon.
Everything's pretty much Amazon. Everyone pretty much just price checks everything against each other. So if Amazon has it for X, then chances are it's going to be about the same price everywhere else.
Except for auto parts. So,
Yeah.
and so like let's take Advance Auto as an example because I was looking for a CV axle for my truck because when I do the wheel bearing, it has this actuator. Um, the actuator is always installed on, or it's always attached to the hub and bearing assembly, right?
Hmm.
But the problem is the diaphragm starts going bad within that, and then what ends up happening is the teeth on the gears start grinding into the CV joint, and then all that crap gets pushed into your bearing. So then you have a bad CV joint, a bad actuator, and a bad hub assembly,
Yeah.
all because of usually a vacuum leak. Um, but anyhow, so I price matched Advance's uh, axles, right? And I noticed they had the exact same part number as this company called, I think it's GSP or something like that,
Yeah.
right? And they just relabel it as a CarQuest brand and say that it's their in-house brand. It's perfect, and yada yada yada. And
But
I noticed that Napa
Cars
did the
too.
exact same thing with the exact same axle manufacturer, right?
Mhm.
Same exact part number, everything looked identical. The verbiage looked very similar on their product description. And Napa wanted like $180 for the axle. Advance wanted about $150 for the axle, and Amazon wants 80.
Perfect.
Yeah. Safe light repairs, safe light replace. That has nothing to do with this. I just wanted to say it. So what are we talking about today, Aaron? Because I put no thought into this.
Well, I remember that video you sent me about that new candidate that's running for president.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
what's his name?
Um,
RFK Jr.
yeah.
And I wanted to look into he mentioned that he's a classical liberal, like roughly a million times during that video. And I
Are you
wanted
sure? I only heard it like probably 100,000.
so,
I'm not sure that he's
so
really
I'm like,
committing to the role personally, but
it was very weird, like in my opinion, where he just kept like saying he was a classical liberal. But I really think what he was trying to get across was that he's not a liberal in the terms of how like Fox News and CNN and like the social aspect of liberalism is.
yeah, he talks funny too.
He does. He
He
does.
has some type of dysphagia. I don't remember what it is.
When I first Googled him, the first thing was like, why does this guy sound weird?
Well, I think I did a pretty good impression of him. I'm really bad at accents and impressions.
That was pretty good. I gave it like a 7 out of 10.
Thanks, sport. I really appreciate that honesty.
But he when I was watching it, I'm like, I can't tell if he's a Democrat or Republican. So I really had to like look into whether what he was. And he kept saying he's a Kennedy Democrat. So I had to look to see what Kennedy Democrat was. It's basically just like it's a centrist. I mean, he's very central in his ideals. Um, but he kept saying like all these buzzwords, and I'm like, these don't mean anything unless you have to like do research on what all these terms he says are what they mean. It was just really confusing. So I had to like,
You really dissected what this guy was saying. Yeah.
yeah, I kind of had to do that, and I'm like, all right, well, you have to first start off with like, what does he mean by classical liberal? And
I have,
like when I first, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have no idea.
Yeah, well, my when I first think of like classical liberal, I think of John Locke, and he's just like some modern philosopher from the 17th century,
Hmm.
which is what we considered modern, and modern philosophy is 17th century.
Yes, I would say that the kids today probably would agree with many of John Locke's philosophies. I know that I saw somebody gangbanger outside, don't get me wrong, and he's like,
Yeah,
"Sir, I beg your pardon," and he just preached the words of John Locke.
probably. I mean, he
Maybe
has
in some
some.
respect.
I mean, so have you ever heard the thing of like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
I have indeed.
So that came from John Locke, but
Oh,
he originally proposed life, liberty, and property. But property in the 17th century was more for just like rich white folks. So it became pursuit of happiness,
because not everybody could afford land. So it's just like,
basically.
and land must be what makes you happy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Good logic. Good logic,
So
guys.
Yeah, so, I mean, he was like, "Yeah, life, liberty, and property." That's what he believed, is like a liberal view, and also that, governments are formed to protect those natural rights,
I would
which makes sense.
agree.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
why else would
government.
you be governed to begin with?
Right, and we kind of touched on this in one of our episodes, I forget which one.
Well, we've touched on it a lot. So,
We do. We do touch on this. I feel like we basically just do a deep dive on all these specific terms that we keep using in all of our other episodes, but
yeah,
John Locke
John
is
Locke.
his liberalism, but pretty much that's what I think of like classical liberal is just like you have a right to life, liberty, and property. But I mean, mostly like life and liberty. And that kind of just falls into like you can do what you want, but like you also just can't randomly punch people in the face because it's not.
That's not
You
nice.
can, you totally have the right, just is not the right, but like you totally have it in your power to do that. Nothing is inherently stopping you other than it's just kind of like a dick move.
Yeah, I would generally say that, like, at least my philosophy is do whatever you want unless you start affecting somebody else's life. But
Yeah,
then again, in recent years, with all the Karens cropping up and stuff like that,
right.
I think that everybody else has a different sense of entitlement than I do. So,
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I mean, this kind of goes to like, all right, so I have the right to life, liberty, and we'll just put pursuit of happiness because it's been changed over the years. And you have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So my rights don't make your rights inferior. We have the same rights, so we have to keep that into account for what we can and can't do.
right. Yeah, it's the golden rule,
Yeah,
basically. Do unto others as you would do unto yourself and let others
yeah,
do whatever they want to do. Like, yeah,
exactly. So that's just kind of like the short term of just like John Locke is. He has this idea. He also goes a little further of like um, there should be limited government surrounding certain things. So like the government shouldn't be getting into everything. There should be limited government. They're basically there to protect, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
right. And if it
That's
falls
like their
outside of
role.
that scope, then it
Yeah,
doesn't affect them. So, like,
right.
if I want to trade my special quarter, the government should have no interest in it, regardless of if it's where it's a really bad example. Who just has a special quarter? The government,
Yeah,
like, you know, I don't know.
right. It's, I mean, liberal. This idea of liberalism just emphasizes the importance of individual rights, limited government, and it's basically it. I mean, they don't want the government to be involved in everything. It's kind of like what we what the Republicans want, where they want
Mhm.
limited government, but they mostly want limited government when it comes to businesses. Like they don't want the government to be like, business, you can't do this. You can do this. You can't do this. They don't want that. They want the business to just be able to do whatever they want.
Yeah, and my business is harvesting organs and then throwing them in the back of my F-150. I got to figure out how to sell them yet, but then that's
Yeah,
profit. So,
right.
uh,
When Locke came up with this idea, he did not know that capitalism was going to be like this. We have to keep that in mind that in the 17th century, there was no such thing as this like capitalistic, like pseudo modern slavery that we have. I mean, that just wasn't a thing.
right. Yeah. It was basically this new, fresh idea that
Yeah,
it it took hold very well, but it's
I mean,
inherently flawed, and it took about, I would say, probably 19th century to really figure out just how flawed it got.
that's basically what happened. Yeah, the early 20th century, 19th century was when capitalism, as we know it, became how it is today. I mean, it really started picking up in like the 40s and 50s, but that's That's where it is. So that's what I think of like liberalism is like limited government, separation of powers. Government can't control everything, which, seems fair. But we do need some sort of government because we need to protect life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's what the government's there for. So that's what I think of classical liberalism. But boy, has it changed, because that's what it has been for like the early 20th century was basically like classical liberalism, and then it kind of just has changed throughout the years of like the mid 20th century liberalism has changed to more like liberalism was like basically anti-communism, things like that, and also more for like civil rights movements, and then it changed again to like more LGBTQ rights, environmentalism, things like that. He also talked about the social contract, which basically was like the people agree to give up some of their natural rights in exchange for the government to protect what rights they have left. But if the government doesn't goes back on their obligations, then the people have the right to break that contract and form a new government.
No,
Yeah,
I mean, that makes sense. Because, like,
yeah,
as an example, communism sounds great until you're ran over by a tank.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Communism is well, later in years we decide that communism is bad,
I don't know. The US has always had a hard on for a hatred of communism.
which I understand why, because it's basically like the government taking control, and people hate that the government has control in a lot of things. But
Really, I think what it comes down to is the fact that, like, if somebody's getting all of their basic needs met, then how can we
mhm,
facilitate trade with those countries?
yeah,
How can we get anything out of them? Because now they're just going to be self sufficient.
it really just comes back down to money.
Pretty much. That's more or less what I was getting at. Like,
Yeah,
and don't get me wrong, like communism has also failed. But and when I
right.
talk about communism, I don't really mean like I mean ideally. I don't mean like because how nice would it be? Like, you grow up, you didn't ask to be born or anything like that, and you have
Mhm,
a place to live no matter what, right? Like, you
yeah,
need a new job. Okay, fine. So, like, government will assign you something that's in your wheelhouse until something sticks,
yeah,
but in the meantime, like, you're just taken care of. You don't got to worry
sure.
about like making all these companies look great. You just like, and even if you do perform better, cool. So, like, where's the incentive for you to like make work your life?
Right. And I think communism has a lot of good things to it. I think what people really get upset about is the government owns you.
Well, that and the fact that like your basic needs really aren't met.
Right. And I have talked to people that, were from Russia and that were part of a communism society. And they're like, yeah, it's actually not that bad. I mean, we get a lot of cool stuff. We get a lot of stuff and we still have freedom, but like,
Mhm.
it's just, they have no complaints over it either.
Mhm.
And it's almost, I mean, there's little bits and pieces of communism that we have in our society already. I mean, we pay taxes, and the government controls a lot of stuff that we have to pay through taxes. Same thing happens through communism. I mean, they collect taxes from people, and they use that money to pay for things that they need, like military. Military is a good example of communism. We have adopted that idea,
Yeah.
but the police, they're. I mean, police is more for like uh, some things that we have, like libraries. Libraries is probably more socialism because the people are paying for the libraries. Yeah, anything that the government takes money for and pays for. is like a communism ideal. It's not straight up communism, but it's just like an aspect of communism because the government is control of it.
Yeah. I mean, but so the idea behind communism is that the government provides for you regardless,
Right.
right? Or, or is that more Marxism than communism?
And it's basically communism. I mean, communism is providing you a service that you have to you can't not have it because the government has to give it to you.
Right.
The government's in control of it. There's no other way for you to get it because the government's in control of it.
Right. And I mean, I hate to say it, but like countries like Sweden and Denmark, I mean, they have some of the highest happiness ratings of any other country, right?
Yeah.
And I forget what they're called. They're not technically a democracy, but they're not communism. It's like
There are I feel like there's something like a social democracy.
that's the word I wanted to use, but
Yeah, they have really high socialism.
yeah, it's basically like, yeah, you'll get taxed 40 to 60%, but all your basic needs are taken care of. And if you want to do better, then like that last 40% is enough incentive for you, but
Right.
the
I mean,
whole goal is like to work together as a whole and not
yeah,
like pit each other against each other.
their rich is taxed 20% and their poor is taxed 20%. I'm just throwing those numbers out there. I don't know the
Right.
exact ones, but I did read about that some areas I have read about some areas like that where Denmark and Sweden, things like that, they do have a higher tax rate. So their doctors they still live comfortably though. They have
Yeah.
higher taxes. They don't have like tax breaks or anything like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
they pay their fair wage. They pay their fair taxes into everything. They get a bunch of free stuff. Basically, the government just like is really good at not controlling, but regulating and taking care of those.
It's good at providing those social services for its,
Yeah, they collect the money, they regulate everything, and they do a good job. Socialism,
yeah,
which I like.
me too. So back to RFK. So um we talked about his idea, well, where he gets the idea of classic liberalism from.
Right. I think what bothers me the most about his classic liberalism is he believes in a lot of classical liberal things, but what he says is just not classical liberalism. It's more republicanism.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree. And I mean, to me, he seems like a guy who's just trying to like be like, look, nobody likes either party here. I might be able to get away with something. And like, if I just say that I'm a Kennedy Democrat, somebody who everybody loved, even though Kennedy was a terrible president. Like, I mean, he did some cool stuff, but he also did some real fucked up shit with like the war with Cuba, and which is really just an extension of the Cold War, but or
Yeah.
of World War II, but because Russia and Cuba being allies, everything stems from that.
Yeah, and I had to look up what a Kennedy Democrat refers to.
I have no idea myself.
Yeah, it refers to John F. Kennedy and his brother and Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and being a Kennedy Democrat is basically just like a a centrist or a center left person.
Yeah.
They believe in social progress, support for civil rights, social welfare programs, things like that. But they also believe in a strong national defense, assertive
Mm-hmm.
foreign policy. They also believe in having an economy that doesn't have a lot of government spending, government regulation, doesn't have a lot of things like that into it. They want to have a government that's not really putting a lot of emphasis on to companies.
Yeah, I mean, at least as far as buzzwords go, that kind of lines up with
Yeah.
classic liberal.
Yeah. I mean, they generally favor policies that promote economic growth through market-based mechanisms, and they're more cautious about government spending
Yeah.
and regulation compared to more liberal Democrats. Because liberal Democrats, they want the government to spend a lot of money on on a lot of things for the country.
Yep.
And I think that's what a lot of people get upset about is if you're a liberal Democrat, you're more for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but you want the government to do more for you. You want more social programs, which I mean, the Kennedy Democrat also likes the social welfare programs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a lot of overlapping too.
Yeah. Well,
Because
my
nowadays
thought,
liberals, sorry, go ahead.
no, what I hear from the one side is like that, I don't want to put it, that they don't want their tax dollars, their hard earned cash going to X or Y. But
Yeah,
from the other side, you hear, well, it's going to a bunch of other stuff that we don't like either.
yeah.
So, like, eh,
I mean,
I mean, to some degree, I feel like we're arguing the same things. We're just the liberal Democrats are more about reappropriating funds to something that actually matters
yeah.
to some degree.
Well, l- nowadays liberalism is more almost like being a liberal Democrat is almost just trying to get free Medicare or Medicare for all and healthcare reform and climate change and more LGBTQ rights and identifying that like more people matter than just rich people.
Well, and that's what I was just gonna say is that
Yeah.
from from my perspective, like, don't get me wrong, somebody's doing well for themselves, then yeah, they they certainly should like be allowed to do that without the government necessarily interfering with that, right?
Mhm.
So I'm certainly not saying that anything anyone makes over $100,000 a year should be taxed. I'm not,
Right.
but the fact of the matter is that for years we've created loopholes. Like there's this loophole in Texas, or I shouldn't say in Texas, but there's this loophole right now going on um, that I really didn't read too much about it. So this is going to come off as unprepared, and I would recommend everybody else do their own research. But
Yeah.
it, I can't even remember what it's called. I really think it was in Texas. But anyhow, the idea was that for years, whenever you inherited property from a relative or something like that, or any, it doesn't have to necessarily be property. It could be things, it could be money, whatever. The idea was that it wouldn't, it would be taxed, once you inherit it. But they're trying to do this thing where essentially it wouldn't be taxed as harshly, I guess
Mhm.
is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Or at all. And it's really just creating generational wealth.
True. Yeah. It
And
is.
at a certain point, like I'm all for a flat tax rate, by the way. I don't care how
Yeah.
broke you are. I don't care how rich you are. At a certain point, if you're making $100,000 a year, 20%. That's it. If you're making $10,000 a year, 20%. That's it.
Yeah.
Leave it be
It
how it is.
I mean, that's kinda how it is now. I mean, if you make $10,000 a year, well, actually, if you make $10,000 a year, I don't even think it's
You don't have to pay taxes at that point.
I think what is the threshold, like, over I think it's like
I thought,
16,000. If you make over 16,000, you have to
yeah, I was
pay
thinking it was
income
about
tax.
20.
But you're already still paying taxes. I mean, 20% still coming out of your paycheck. You're still paying taxes. You're just not paying taxes at the end of the year. You're not.
Right.
So that's where that's I think that's fair because you're still contributing to society. I mean, if you have a job and you're making $10,000 a year, you're still losing to 20% of your paycheck.
Right. No tax breaks.
Right, tax breaks, yeah. And your bracket also. But it
Yeah,
also
I
comes
know.
down to like if you're making $100,000 a year and you're losing 20%, you still have $80,000, which
Right.
is a ton. If you make 10, let's say you're getting taxed 20%, I mean, and you're making $10,000. I mean, that's $2,000 is a lot. You're only making 10,000.
Well, and the other way to do it, by the way, is
Yeah.
to set up a, I don't want to put it, because the way it is right now is it's stepped, right? So if
Mhm.
you make $20,000 a year, you might be paying 5% in taxes. If you make
Yeah.
30,000, maybe 10%, right?
Yeah.
But anybody below a certain income threshold,
Mhm.
you know, like who's realistically surviving off of $16,000 a year except for high school kids who have just gotten their first job, maybe college kids,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Who's realistically surviving off of that? Because I can't think of a single person. So
Right. I mean,
let's say 16,000 is where you start getting taxed at. Fine. Subtract 16,000 from whatever it is. Anything over that, you're charged 20% in tax. It's
right.
that simple.
It just as you make more money, that tax that you're paying into doesn't affect you as much as if you have less income.
Right.
But if you're making $1 million a year in salary, that 20%, you still have way more money than you'll.
$800,000 is way more than the guy who is getting paid 100,000.
Yeah. And
That should be manageable. I mean,
and
now,
their argument is, well, I'm already paying like, $200,000 into taxes. That's not fair. And people are like, yeah, that's not fair. And then they get their taxes lowered. and then and then we have this issue now where people sometimes pay nothing into the year-end taxes. And
right. And that's what I'm saying needs to be addressed more than anything else. It's that Donald Trump should have to pay his taxes as he shits his pants on stage. He should still have to pay his fair share of taxes. It's a
exactly.
capitalistic environment, but the idea of capitalism is to make money. Do you think that Uncle Sam doesn't want to make his?
Right.
You guys are the ones who are promoting this. You are the ones who are using everybody
Yeah.
to create this.
I mean,
Just,
Elon Musk made a post. It was like 2 years ago. He's like, I spent $23 million on taxes. Well, you're what, a multi-billionaire? So
yeah,
23 million of your billions of dollars is not
right.
affecting you as much as
That
the people that.
$1,000 for
Yeah.
somebody in that $30,000 bracket. Yeah,
I mean,
I get it.
if I yeah, I mean, if I had an extra, like, I don't know, $2,000 a year, like, that would be great. Like, I think that's what I mean, I think mine's a little bit higher than that. I think I lose.
Right.
I mean,
But it's
it's
not
like
like these things are going towards nothing, right? It's
yeah,
what you said earlier. The richer you are, the less you probably need the library. The
E
richer you are, the less you
Yeah.
probably need healthcare. The
Mhm.
richer you are, the less you probably need to, like, you know, care about property taxes.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm getting at is, like, if you're a liberal, you care more about the people than, like, your individual rights, and as a liberal, you do care about your individual rights, but you also under a straight liberal government wouldn't work.
No,
That's also what
no,
I'm trying
it
to
would
get at,
no.
is if you're 100% liberal and you're trying to run a government based off the 100% liberal ideals, it's not gonna work. I mean, I understand that as a liberal, we it wouldn't function. It would function really small scale.
Mhm.
It'd be great. A liberal government in a society will be great small scale, but as you
Yeah,
go higher and
like a
higher,
county size,
yeah, it's just not gonna
maybe.
work. You need you need the government to step in, have government assisted programs. You just need that stuff. I mean, for a
No,
government to prosper, it's just has to happen.
no.
And
Well,
I think that's
go
what
ahead.
Locke is getting at as well, is like you need a government, limited government, perfect, great. Enter into that contract, have the government take control. You lose some of your rights, but you are gonna get more out of it than you're losing.
Yeah, because as an example, yeah, you lose the right to fence off your neighbor's property by 5 feet
Mhm.
in any direction, but at the same time, there's a fire department if your house burns down.
Yeah,
You got police when you inevitably try to take 5 feet of his land in all directions to
yeah,
dispute that and stop him from killing you,
mhm,
like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as a liberal, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm more of like a classical liberal, but not like a JFK Jr. classical liberal. I'm more of like a John
Oh,
Locke liberal.
I was just gonna ask if you were a Kennedy liberal, so,
No, I
but
he's too center. He's like, "Yeah, I wanna bring business." I he during that interview, or not interview, but during his, like, pitch, he's like, he says something about capitalism, and I'm like, "This is weird."
yeah, yeah,
And when you're pro-capitalism, it's it's basically saying, "I love capitalism, and I want to get the government out of capitalism so that I can do more with capitalism."
yeah, a
And
little
that's
bit
scary.
odd, right?
Like, when he said that, it was actually like, "Okay, this is scary. What's he wanna do?" Does he want to, like, banish and appall the unions? But I think he said that he was pro-unions later in it.
Yeah, he did say pro-unions, yeah.
Yeah, and if the government, like, really regulated on that stuff, we wouldn't even have a need for a union, so we wouldn't have the need for union busting, but
Yeah,
it's
because
just
it's just advocating for your workers. Now, granted,
yeah,
like, I do believe workers should perform, don't get me wrong,
I agree.
but, like, you shouldn't just be given a $3 pay raise because your company decided to keep you, but it's also up to the company to decide whether or not they're going to keep you,
Yeah,
if you understand what I'm saying. It's a mix and match of ideas, yeah, but then again, I'm a Kennedy Democrat, so I'm not. I don't even know what that means still.
it honestly, like, some of those words are just like
Nonsense.
yeah, it's basically nonsense. Like, you're not really
Most of
you're
what he was saying was nonsense.
yeah, I mean, most of it was, and a lot of the words that people use in government just don't mean anything. Like,
Mhm.
they have, like, their own speech that they think has meaning to it, and then
Well,
throw a
if
bunch
you
of
make
buzzwords.
something vague enough, right?
Yeah,
At
you're just
least in
gonna
my
fire
opinion, if you make
mhm,
something big enough, then it can just be disputed later. But in the
right.
interim, you might pick up somebody who's like, "Oh, I agree with this one thing. I don't know what you mean about this, but like that sounds like something that I might be interested in because you're smiling while I'm watching this video.
Yeah. I mean, he
Or
definitely couldn't say that he was a liberal because if he said that,
no,
people would automatically think that he is all for LGBTQ and he wants to transition.
no.
But like,
And he hates the trans. Trust me, I talked to him for hours. I didn't talk to him for hours. He
yeah,
probably doesn't hate trans. He probably doesn't care. It seems like a
uh,
long shot that he would even be any sort of nominee. I find it funny that the only way that he would even be able to run is like under the Republican Party. But if Trump doesn't get thrown in jail and picks DeSantis as his VP,
yeah,
he's probably going to win.
it would be interesting.
Because, like, I
We,
can't think of a single liberal who loves Joe Biden. I can't.
I mean, I don't mind him. There are
He's
some things
okay.
that, yeah, he's fine. That's just my opinion.
He's better than the alternative, but at the same time, like, he's not what
He's,
anybody wanted. He's the compromise that nobody from either side wanted.
I don't think Trump nor Biden should run. I think we need new people,
I
honestly.
think we need people who probably aren't in diapers. Somebody maybe
Yeah,
50.
right. And RFK Jr was 55, I think, from what I
Is he?
was he or was he 65? I forget now. He was younger, but still, we need just like new people
Yeah.
to steer the direction of where this government's going. But
Somebody whose skin isn't falling off like Nancy Pelosi's is. That'd be cool. It's weird that Bernie has like he's so vibrant, and I doubt he shits himself. But I'm pretty sure that Biden and Trump both do. Actually, I read an article yesterday about how Trump publicly announced that he shits himself and or something like that, and they're making T-shirts now. Mega is making T-shirts to because that's what they do. It's like, oh, here's a weakness. Well, let's applaud this weakness. Let me see if I can find the article.
yeah, I just don't feel good. about,
The top
about for
the top result I got was from Quora, and it said, "Did Trump blast his pants again in court?
perfect.
Did Donald Trump really poop his pants, and is he extremely proud of it?"
Yeah.
Let me read further. I want to read some of these results. According to several sources, Donald Trump has been incontinent for 25 years or so. It was common enough for him to have an accident during the production of The Apprentice that they had a standard procedure for it. They would break on set while an aide took him backstage to clean up and change. It was especially a problem when he lost his temper, which happened regularly.
Jesus Christ.
Trump has a well known fondness for stimulants. He did his share of cocaine back in the day, and he is believed to be an Adderall abuser today, which explains why he sniffs so much during many of his speeches. Stimulants have a laxative effect, and over the years, they have left him unable to control his bowels. He has reached a point where he hardly even notices accidents anymore. Trump would no doubt use such a condition to taunt an opponent, but he works very hard to hide his own problems. Someday he is going to have a major embarrassment.
So that's gonna be our next president. Just
Again. Yeah, I have no clue if any of that is true, by the way.
yeah, I don't know either.
No idea. I didn't fact
Yeah,
check that.
yeah, I'm not
But
fact checking that.
I well, I have been it's been coming up more frequently that he poops his pants for some reason on my
Yeah,
feed. I don't know why.
you
But
know,
it doesn't surprise me because you're electing 80-year-old men.
he sounds
Like,
like a
who is like,
neoliberal.
yeah, well, I sound like a neoliberal.
No, he does. He sounds like one of those neoliberals.
I don't even care. Like, dude is ancient. So is Bernie. So
Yeah,
is everybody else. If any of them shit their pants, I wouldn't be surprised.
that's just what you do when you get older.
Yeah, you get that and you get dementia, and everybody's like, "Oh, Biden has dementia." You're electing a 76-year-old man. What the
Yeah,
fuck did you expect? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
we're just debating on which 76-year-old man has that expertise that we need to get this country going again. You know what I'm saying? Who in their fucking right mind is like, we need a warrior, we need a real leader. Where are our senior citizens at? You understand what I'm saying?
I do. I
Give
do understand.
me 1 second. I'm gonna be right back. I have to lap this off for a second and shit my pants again. I keep shitting them and so pros about RFK. I doubt he shits his pants yet because he's been pretty honest about his dysphagia.
Yeah.
So I think if he
I
pooped his
think
pants, he'd be,
I th-
honest about it.
if it was between Trump and this guy, I'd vote for him. I mean, yeah, there's a
Okay.
lot of things that I don't agree with him, but like I really just don't want Trump in office again because I
I
think
was
he's
just gonna
just
ask
more
you.
fucking
Let's
good.
let's do a different one then. What about Trump versus Bill Cosby?
I'd go for Bill Cosby.
Because he'll give everybody a free pudding pop. All right.
I
So
just think Trump is just I mean, I if it was between DeSantis and Trump, that's a tough one.
they're both kind of evil. DeSantis is funnier though.
DeSantis is really scary. Like
I know.
at least Trump he kind of you kind of know what you're going to get, and DeSantis is like he's
He's like a
really
chaotic version of Trump. Do you remember
he
when he sent
is.
he found like a bunch of immigrants who weren't supposed to be in Florida or something like that, right?
Mhm.
And so he decided to send them out of the state. So he sent them all to Kamala Harris's house. Uh,
Yep. That's another thing that RFK Jr said. Well, he's like, I want to shut down the border. I'm like, that's not very liberal of you.
no, that's not very liberal considering that we're the melting pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's the only reason why America is the way it is because of like our
Even
immigration.
during World War II, we took in German scientists who eventually created an atomic bomb for us, or maybe that was World War One.
It was
It is somewhere in there.
yeah.
But we
I mean,
took them in, and then we decided, you know what? You guys build a cool weapon for us. We took you in because we're liberal. Now do something cool for us. And they showed their appreciation by creating the atomic bomb and atomic power.
yeah,
hmm The end.
yeah.
We're all happy.
Uh,
I'm not happy.
we we're doing great. Um,
Oh, I don't know.
we're doing okay. We're surviving as inflation skyrockets and groceries go up another 20%. But luckily, we get that 3% raise every year, so it evens out.
Wait, you said
Unless you do math.
20%. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you do math, then you realize you're just getting the
That
baddest
does
of the
explain why, like, so many people have so many opinions, but then you ask them certain things and they say, oh, I'm bad at math. Have you ever noticed that about certain people? Like,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I want my guns and I want this and I want that. And then you're like, you know, "Oh, what do your wages add up to in a year? Well, it depends. And with the overtime, I really can't say. I'm not very good with math.
Yeah. I mean, I know how much money I make, but I'm just better at math than them, I guess.
Anything over 40 is 40, or anything over 40, multiply your wage by 1.5.
Whoa, whoa,
It
whoa.
ain't, I know. One
People
and a
can't even
half.
10% tips.
Yeah.
Ask someone to do a 15% tip off their bill. Like, see how much they cry. It's not.
I ain't paying more than 5%. Back in my day, a waitress could afford new house, new car. Young
Yeah.
man. I don't even blast my pants yet. So, so what were some other buzzwords that this dude used, by the way? I know those are the two that you've been picking on, but
Classical liberal. And what was another one I said?
Kennedy Democrat.
Kennedy Democrat. Oh man, what else did he say? I felt like he said five. He he pitched five ideas. I think of like what he wants to do to get the government back on track.
That's definitely him. I'm
Yeah,
Googling right now.
I mean, I
He,
know he. I know he's not really. I know he's not really liberal. That's all I really know. And I know he's not really Democrat, but he does like some Democratic stuff though. Like he wants to get jobs back into America rather than overseas, which is cool.
then let me see when this article was written.
No one's gonna do that.
March 18th, 2024. He plans to announce his vice presidential nominee later this month in Oakland and is stoking expectations that he might pick New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers or former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura.
Jesus fucking Christ. Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers as vice president.
I don't know who Aaron Rodgers is.
He was a
I don't watch
quarterback.
the football. He is what?
He was a quarterback
Well, I know that much. For the New York Jets, I just said that.
for Green Bay.
Yeah. Well, at least Jesse Ventura makes sense if you like wrestling and government. Didn't Jesse Ventura used to be a wrestler?
I don't know. I really wish people would stop like
Yeah.
being celebrities.
Jesse Ventura, former government of Minnesota. He's a politician, actor, and retired professional wrestler. Why are we electing a professional wrestler? We've all agreed that wrestling, by the way, wrestling is fake. We've all agreed on this, right? It's just about the drama and the show. And yet that's what we've decided. That's who we've decided. It is improv on stage while hitting people or faking to hit people. And we have decided that he should have been a president. Now, granted, like I've listened to some of Jesse Ventura's ideas, right? And he's nutty, but I didn't hate him. So, like, that's a better alternative than Donald Trump. Former pro wrestler for the WWF/WWE, Jesse Ventura, who has already ran for president. He's 70, by the way.
Oh geez.
Yeah. So he probably, well, he's close to shitting his pants age.
I I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't either. And he's like the underdog of the underdogs, by the way. For some reason, he's just all over the internet right now. And I assume that's because, like, you know, Google tracks and TikTok tracks and Facebook tracks.
Yeah.
They're all tracking and sharing with each other. Don't think they aren't. So, but you won't be able to watch on TikTok soon because, like, when we decided that we were going to give aid to Gaza, we snuck in a thing where, how fucked is that, by the way? So, when we decided that we were going to give aid to Gaza in the background because everybody voted that they didn't like TikTok, right?
Mhm.
They were like, oh, we'll just shove this back here. Nobody will notice. And they like decided to ban TikTok in a bill that was supposed to be deciding the amount of aid for a foreign country.
Perfect. You just add things in.
Yeah, while we're on this subject of helping out the Jews and Hamas and providing humanitarian aid, TikTok. This is important, gentlemen.
It is. Without TikTok, how are people going to get their political news? Wait,
You do realize that, like, was Reddit made in the United States? I have to Google this first. Was Reddit, or is Reddit a U.S. company? Because I thought they
I
might be
thought so.
British. Yeah, San Francisco. So Facebook is a U.S. company. Instagram,
Yeah,
owned by Facebook, is a U.S. company.
yeah.
True Social, is that the name of it? That's definitely a U.S. company.
Yeah.
Um, that's not even up on the top 10, though. So
Twitter.
Reddit,
Yeah,
Twitter. Have you noticed how all these social media companies are all U.S. companies?
yeah.
And the one that they're having an issue with is TikTok. And the only thing that that doesn't have in common with Instagram is A, TikTok has a shop, which, I mean, it's all right. But B, it's not owned by our own government.
Nope.
So think about that for a second. We've been in control of social media for a while now,
Mm-hmm.
since the dawn of it, because it all originated here, because we are a bunch of gossipy queens. You understand what I'm saying here, right?
Yeah, I do. I do.
I mean,
I mean,
Edward Snowden discovered that the government was spying on us back during the Bush administration, right? Undeniably so. And you can think what you want about Edward Snowden. I don't really care. I don't have anything against him or for him. I like that he made the information public so that way we know that the government is spying on us, because that goes against life, liberty, and the pursuit of. Are we going for pursuit of property or pursuit of happiness at this point?
pursuit of happiness.
Pursuit of property. Gotcha. Anyhow, anyhow, so that's the whole thing, is that he was like, hey, this goes against my views on what the country should be. And, he became a whistleblower for it.
Yeah.
But before that, everybody else kind of assumed but didn't know. And the government kind of chased him around for a little bit. And he made a real dramatic show of it, right?
Mm.
But nonetheless, like, he kind of exposed what we already knew, that social media was collecting our data and selling it,
Oh yeah.
as was Apple, as was
Sure.
Google, as was everybody.
Yeah.
And we already knew that. But fast forward, so at that point, Facebook had already became a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, I think, probably just started, but MySpace, also an American social media company, right? Reddit.
Yeah.
It's like with Edward Bernays. My point is that it's about controlling. We don't read newspapers anymore, but we do
No.
read Facebook.
Right.
And we can control Facebook, and we can control Reddit, and we don't really care that much. But TikTok, that they have a U.S. representative for it, some CEO over here, right?
Yeah.
And they kept telling him to divest, and I don't really know what happened with that, but my point is that we have an issue with TikTok because it imposes against our government's ability to, I don't want to say control the narrative, but to
Influence.
limit to do what?
Influence.
Yeah, because now if another government wants to influence it, I mean, who's the parent company going to listen to?
Right.
And it wouldn't have happened if it was like Great Britain or anywhere in the UK. But the fact that China owns it,
It's crazy times.
it's just interesting. And I'm sure we'll read about. Could you imagine right now, in 100 years, reading about TikTok in a history book?
Well, in 100 years, our history books are gonna be. It's just gonna be like red pill only stuff. Like we're not gonna. It's gonna say something like, um, U.S. government took over, um, communism propaganda, and that's how they're gonna word the TikTok ban.
And did you watched Idiocracy? We had an
Yeah, I did.
episode about how after you finally watched Idiocracy
Yeah, and we did that episode on
and the un-Nazi the world forever.
it. Yep, that's how they're gonna word
Yeah,
it.
yeah, something like
Um,
that.
I think JFK Jr. What did he said
You
something
mean
about,
RFK Jr.?
yeah, RFK Jr. He
You
said,
did that earlier too, and I'm like, JFK Jr. is his own thing.
yeah, he is. Also, didn't he die?
I think so.
I
The
think he died.
Kennedys are a rare breed.
Yeah, there was so one of the juniors, someone died, uh, and they're waiting for him to like come back to life to bring back like the new wave government. Like wasn't that a thing like 2 years ago what the MAGA was preaching? But anyway, um,
The fact that like so many Kennedys are in government, like that's an oligarchy. Like,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like that's an oligarchy. You might as well be a monarchy at that point. Here's a family with generational wealth and they're able to speak out because they got money.
yeah. RFK said something about like he said something really weird, and I'm trying to think of what it was again. I should have just re-listened to it and made like little bullet points before this.
No, you did better than I did. I didn't even know what we were talking about today. So
Yeah, I kind of just like I had this idea of just talking about liberalism and defining what liberalism is and how it has changed throughout this 120 years because man, it's been crazy.
yeah, well, and it's kind of evolved into its own thing that
Yeah. At one point, we started talking about neoliberalism, and
right. Well, according to the Associated Press, Kennedy frames himself as a truth teller with a track record of fighting for the middle class against powerful interests. He points to lawsuits he's won against corporate behemoths such as Monsanto and DuPont. I can
Mhm.
fix this country, he said in Las Vegas in February. I doubt it.
I don't know either.
Your brain hurts, doesn't it?
Kinda.
Mine hurts. Because I'm just, you can only listen to so much bullshit for so long before you're just like, I don't know what to believe anymore. And I'm just done with this.
I agree. I'm also done with this.
He also said on a podcast, not our podcast, though if you want to come on here, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I ain't opposed to it. We got like maybe 90 listeners at this point, maybe. Probably not
Maybe.
even. I don't know. I don't know how many people work at like that Starbucks that you go to. So,
I think only like two of them are listening now.
oh, we annoyed
Yeah.
them. That makes sense.
Yeah.
They probably wanted Bernie.
I want
I would, Bernie, too.
Bernie.
But but he has repeatedly made his opposition to vaccines clear. He said on a podcast, "There's no vaccine that is safe and effective," and has urged people to resist CDC guidelines on when kids get vaccinated. So that's cool. We don't like science.
Where is this world coming to? I just want to know what's going to happen in like the next. I don't want to like live through it. I just want to like just know what's going to happen in the next 20 years. I don't want to deal with it.
Well, in
I'm
this
gonna have
instance, don't worry, because the United States has a long history of rejecting independent or third-party presidential candidates. In fact, the last president to win without a party's backing was George Washington.
perfect.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
The last third-party candidate to make it was Abraham Lincoln. He was the dawn of the Republican Party.
Yeah. And he was anti-slavery, which is a very liberal idea.
Yeah. Very liberal. Because slaves, I will have you know that slaves, they're cheap labor.
They are. Just like McDonald's. They're like, man, I only had to pay someone like $16 to work here. Man.
And in 6 months, when you're up for review, you might get a 20% raise. Sorry, 20-cent raise. Yeah. You don't know if I said percent or cent.
That's
Nobody
true.
knows.
And honestly, like some people are so bad at percentages, they're like, if you say 20% and you give them 20 cents, they'll be like, oh man, it's got a 20% raise.
$20 per cent. Yeah. I make like 13 cents. But thank you, all less than 90 listeners. We appreciate you.
Tune in next time when we talk about, I don't know, maybe some more of this. Maybe you won't even hear this episode because it's that bad of an edit. All right. Catch you on the flip side. Because that's what the cool kids say.
Yeah. Is that
All
what
right.
liberal Democrats say?
No, they say,
There is no flip side. We shall all be on the same side of the coin.
yeah, it's really, it's like that episode of Futurama where they're the same candidate, but like slightly, like just a little bit different.
They got the same people talking to them. How's that
Yeah,
different?
kind of is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Everyone's just going to raise and lower taxes every year.
Saws to rule them all. I just realized that. Huh. The name you gave the podcast episode, you called it Saws to Rule Them All.
Oh yeah, because you have to use
Yeah.
a saw to install a radio nowadays.
Well, apparently. So, but as the supreme leader of the art court, it's my title. I'll have a title.
Aaron.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and I'm not mono.
No, you're supreme leader of the art court, Ryan.
Oh, yeah. Like who else would I be?
I don't know. Not mono.
Definitely not Bono. Maybe mono.
Yeah.
Or maybe I don't know. Anyways, I'm Ryan.
I'm Aaron. Bye.
Bye.